Oh, how are you guys doing? Hope you're having a great week. Man, we've got summer weather, it feels like. I wore shorts to work yesterday. It was a great moment for me. I love when summer comes and I can wear shorts and a polo is my preferred outfit all the time. So that's always kind of nice. A couple quick announcements here. Of course, last week we were off for spring break. I got one text from a friend of mine who said, "I'm all alone in the South Auditorium." I said, I'm sorry, man. So hopefully that wasn't more of you who had that same experience. Next week, as you remember, we have something kind of special. Dick Foth is going to be here, and we're doing a special night. We're not going to have worship or communion at the end. It'll just be a whole evening dedicated to Pastor Dick Foth doing what he does best, which is storytelling. He's wonderful at that, and his topic is stories that lift our heart. And so I would really encourage you to be here. Invite someone, even someone whose faith might be kind of distant from them. Stories are a great way, you probably know this, to draw people in, right? Like there's something about you go see a movie, and the movie can have a completely different worldview than you, but if it invites you in and it's interesting, you step into the story and you start evaluating not from without, but from within. And that's what's so fantastic about stories. So Foth does these stories where you find yourself inside already, and you begin to evaluate the world through his paradigm that he's set up. That's both the power and the beauty of story. So I hope you'll be there for that. And then just kind of scheduling April 9, put this in your calendars. April 9 is our last Wednesday night for the semester. And then we'll take a break for the summer and be back in the fall, okay? So two more weeks, including Dick Foth's week with us. So we are starting to wrap up this series, The Lost World of Genesis. We've kind of taken it in two chapters. Last semester in the fall, we were looking at really chapters 1 through 11. This is a very broad look. It's considering all of humanity, all of the human family that God has made, and what things happened after their creation, their disconnect from their creator, and then how even that physical world, how we're supposed to understand, how does it engage with the unseen world, with God's space. And the ideal was that these two spaces would overlap. That's what Eden was. It was God's abode and humans' abode. It was about us living together. So it informs us a little bit, not just about our past, but also informs us about where are things going? Where's this story going? Is it as the Eastern mystics say, everything's just repetitive, everything just repeats eternally? Or is it like the seculars say, no, eventually everything's going to die of a heat loss and it's over? And the biblical story says, oh, no, it's neither. It's neither eternally repetitive nor dying of a heat loss at some point. It's going somewhere, and it's going to get back to, God is insistent upon it, that these two realms are once again overlapped. That's some of what we saw in these first chapters, and yet we also saw the obstacles. That God says, you are both the obstacle to this, and yet I'm not going to do it without you. And so questions are set up in the reader's mind. Well, how might he do that? And so we explored that whole piece first semester. And then this semester's chapter 2, in which we look at the camera angle goes from a wide lens to a narrow focus on just one particular person who God is going to make a new humanity out of, a new family out of, and that's Abraham. And so we've just been looking at the life of Abraham over these previous weeks. And we saw this idea that God called Abraham when he was a pagan worshiper of other gods. He's in Mesopotamia, he's in Babylon. And he and Sarah out of that land to go to a land where he will give him. And of course, we're told right away, Sarah, she's barren, she can't have children. But he says, don't worry, I'm going to give you children. And don't worry, I'm going to give you land. And so Abram leaves, but of course he brings Lot with him, and we said that was a little odd. Is he disobeying? Is it like partial obedience? And then we kind of see it might have been because that Lot issue caused a problem later. God promises to Abraham that he will have a great name, make him to a great nation, and that if he lives in the way that God calls him to, actually all the other peoples around him will look toward him and go, what do you have? What is that about? In fact, we see one of those elements happening at one point here. He goes to the land. He travels around this land, having these sort of moments of worship. It's like a traveling worship thing where he travels. He usually goes up into a high place. We talked about sacred mountains. He goes up to a high place. Oftentimes, do you remember what's by those high places? Trees, right? It's to recall. You're supposed to think of, well, where did God originally live? Well, the abode of Eden. What was Eden like? Trees and luscious, and it was a high place. And so those places in the mind of the ancient person sort of recalls it. You ever walk into someone's house or a store and you catch a scent of maybe bread that's cooking, and your mind immediately, what does it do? It rushes back to some moment in your life where you go, oh, I remember that smell. There are certain smells that when my grandma Joy would cook, she was an amazing cook. And every once in a while, I catch just a hint of it, you know what I mean? And I am just transported back to my grandma's house on Estrella Boulevard in Loveland as a 5-year-old, as a 6-year-old. It takes me there emotionally. You with me? This is what's going on in these events. When Abraham walks in, he finds a group of trees or this high place, and God shows up. It's like that smell of the house, of the food, of the baking things. It's taking that person back to that moment where the two places overlapped. That make sense? That's what's going on with the trees and the mountain stuff. That's kind of what's happening there. Abram gets into the land. There's famine in the land, so he and Sarah have to almost immediately leave. They go down to Egypt. We know of Abraham's failure there. He doesn't trust God with his safety. He thinks he has to secure his safety on his own, so he lies about his wife. Well, tells a partial truth, partial lie. She's my sister. Well, she was kind of half-sister, but he lies to protect himself. God is so insistent on this not wrecking the plan. God visits Pharaoh and the people with plagues, and Pharaoh comes and says, why have you lied to me? And he confesses, well, here's what's going on. He says, so take her, this God of yours, he's in my land that usually my God rules. Yours is more powerful. Go. And he gives him lots of possessions, and Abram gets even wealthier and wealthier. He even gets a slave girl by the name of Hagar. He's used ill-gotten gain, which always bites you. This is going to bite him later. Because of both he and Lot's great wealth, the increase of their animals that graze, they actually run out of real estate. They run out of land in this new location, so they have to split. Lot goes down to Sodom and lives there. In the meantime, there are 4 Babylonian kings who kind of follow Abraham from the land he left. And they come to Canaan, and they start warring with 5 Canaanite kings here. These Babylonian kings war with 5 other Canaanite kings. So 9 kings, and they battle, and they end up stealing Lot, and Abram has to go rescue Lot and take all the stuff they stole and brings it back. And then at that moment, there was this unique moment where a 10th king by the name of Melchizedek came out, and he was a king of Salem, the location that's going to become in the future Jerusalem, is where he's the king. And we're told he's a priest, not to all the gods of the nations. He's actually a priest to the Most High God. And it sets up these interesting ideas that biblical authors are continuing to puzzle over and think about. But God promises Abraham a son. And Abram's first response is, I believe you. And the author goes, man, God credited that to him as righteousness. That's the right way to be in relationship with God, to trust him. And then right away afterwards, he says, I'm going to give you land too. And Abraham goes, oh, I don't know how that's possible. Great faith at one moment, the very next moment, doubt. And so God says, okay, I guess I have to make a covenant with you. Not that a covenant's a bad thing, but it's necessary for people who don't trust each other. And so he makes a covenant with him. If you remember, they cut the animals apart. But God doesn't allow Abram to walk through the covenant, because if they both walk through, if it doesn't work, one or the other dies. So just God goes through the covenant animals that are cut. Sarah devises a plan to kind of help God out because it's stalled, it seems, to the human eye. There's no child coming. So she takes her slave girl, Hagar, and gives her to Abraham and says, we'll have a child through her. It'll be my child because the woman belongs to me, therefore the child will belong to me as well. Well, as things do, when we do it in our own time, it goes awry. And she begins to resent this woman, and so she mistreats her. She abuses this servant girl, Hagar, this Egyptian servant. Hagar runs away, but God himself, the second person of the Trinity prior to incarnation, meets her out there and says, go back home, I'll take care of you. You are going to have a son, and I'm going to take care of him as well. Ishmael's born. For 13 years, this family believes this is the promised child. For 13 long years. Well, 13 years later, Yahweh shows up again, taking on physical form for the time to engage with Abraham. And he says, I'm going to give you the sign of our covenant, the thing that you're going to do that communicates both to you and to anyone else. You're in covenant with this God, Yahweh God, and that is the sign of circumcision. And then he announces, it's Sarah, the barren elder woman, who's going to have your seed. It's not Ishmael that comes from Hagar. It's going to be another one. Sarah thinks this is ridiculous. She's hiding in the tent behind, and she quietly laughs to herself. God, knowing all, says, why did you laugh? She denies it. He says, I kind of know everything. And so he says, your child's going to be called Laughter, Isaac. And it'll always, every time you call his name in for dinner, you'll remember, I got this not because of my faith was perfect. I got this because God is gracious. And my faith is always up and down and imperfect. Yahweh shows up sometime later. He and two other angelic beings in physical form. And they come to Abraham. And he says to him, should I show Abram? He asks members of his divine council, give me your thoughts on this. Should I show Abram what I'm going to do to the city of Sodom? Because, after all, he's going to become a great nation. I want his people to live in ways that are right and honoring, so they're not judged. And then Abraham spends some time interceding for any potential righteous people who might be in this city. And he starts at a high number. He finally gets down to 10 and realizes there's not even 10 righteous people in the city. And so God sends these two people that he came with, these angelic beings, down to the city to inspect and see if it truly is that bad. These angelic beings are met by Lot, the one who went to go live there. They're brought into his house. And in the middle of the night, the men of Sodom surround the house, demand that Lot turns over these two individuals who are staying with them for gang rape. These angelic beings blind the men of the city. They force the family, these few who are righteous, Lot and his wife and their daughters, two daughters, out of the city. Sodom is destroyed by yet another flood, we're told, but it's not a flood of water. It's a flood of fire from the sky itself, and Lot's wife perishes in the process. Lot goes and lives in a town for a short period of time. He's frightened there. Then he moves to a cave with his two daughters. His daughters worry there are no other men, and they won't be able to procreate, get their father drunk, and they have sex with him and become pregnant, each one of them producing children. Then there's another story of Abraham going to another place, not down in Egypt this time, but the Canaanites. And he lies to yet another leader about his wife. And the same thing repeats itself. Abraham keeps falling into the same patterns of sin and failure. The same thing happens. Finally, Isaac, the promised son, is born of Sarah and of Abraham. He's circumcised on the 8th day, bearing the sign that he is in covenant with Yahweh God. Sarah once again turns against Hagar, wants her and her son Ishmael dismissed. Abraham allows it, sends them out in the wilderness to die. And once again, the God of the universe takes on physical form, and he shows up to them, and he says, don't worry, I told you I would watch over you, even if no one else will. I will watch over you, and I will watch over your son. Abraham makes a treaty covenant with Abimelech. It's a short story that doesn't seem to have a whole lot of impact, except for the fact that it's demonstrating how Israel can be a blessing to those around them if they live in peace with them. And if these people live in peace with them, they can actually be a huge blessing to others. Abimelech realizes this God is with him. That's what he says. I can't help but noticing God, he's with you. So I want to be with you because God's with you. And if I'm with you, I have some sort of a relationship with God, is what he realizes. And then last week, this binding of Isaac, everything seems to be coming together. And then God finally says, you know that son that you've been waiting for, not for 13 years, not for 30 years, your whole life? You know that one? I want you to take him up onto a high mountain, and I want you to sacrifice him, bind him. And it's a test. Has this gift that I've given you become more important than the giver? Has he become an idol in your life? Or are you willing to give him up, the thing you've wanted your entire life, the thing I've promised you? What if I revoked that promise? Do you love me more than anything else? And so there's this slowing down of the story. We looked at everything's fast-paced, and then the story seems to just inch along, drawing out the drama of what's happening. He climbs up Mount Moriah, the very mountain on which one day Solomon will build the temple itself, where sacrifices of lambs and animals will be carried out. And as Isaac is bound up there on an altar, just before Abraham plunges the knife, an angel of the Lord, this character we've seen before, the character who appeared to Hagar out in the desert, he comes and stops. And he says, now it's demonstrated you love me most. I don't want you to sacrifice him, but I did want you to know you loved me most. I wanted you to be able to demonstrate it because you failed a lot along the way. So you need to know what it looks like to have complete faith and trust in me. And then they notice there happened to be, we'll come across that word tonight, there happened to be a ram caught in a little thicket over there, and that ram was substituted. Maybe the first one ever sacrificed on Mount Moriah, where later Israelites would come to annually to make their sacrifices in recognition that they were sinful and that this is what they deserved. But through God's grace, there's another option of some sort. Tonight, we're looking at about 2.5 chapters. We won't read it all. One of the ones we're looking at is the longest chapter in the book of Genesis. It's actually the longest chapter in the whole Torah, the first 5 books. It's like 67 verses. And it's long because there's one story that gets repeated 3 times with some variation in it, but it gets repeated 3 times. The end of chapter 23, Sarah dies, Abram's love. She dies. Chapter 24, Abraham is also getting old. He knows his time is coming, and so he says, the seed, that's still important. My son, Isaac, if there's going to be more seed, I've got to get him a wife before I die. And I need to be sure it's from the right place. And so he sets about doing that in chapter 24. And then the beginning of chapter 24, Abraham, in good many old years, full years, it says, he died. And he was buried. He was gathered with his ancestors. So that's where we're going tonight. Genesis chapter 23. And I want to start Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. We read this. Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died at Kiriath Arba, which means 4 villages. So there might have been 4 villages there or something. Today, the editor tells us that's Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Typically, what would be done in the ancient world is either for 7 days or 30 days. If someone you love died, you would change the way you dress, you would change the way you eat. It would communicate to people you're in a place of mourning. Verse 3, and Abraham rose up from before his dead, or his dead one, we would say the deceased, and said to the Hittites, Hittites, if you remember, are descendants of Ham, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, one of the 3 sons of Noah, said to the Hittites, I am a sojourner and a foreigner from among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sights. The Hittites answered Abraham, hear us, my Lord. You are a prince of God. Remember, Sarah's name meant princess. He's the prince, is how it's thought of, prince, princess. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will withhold from you his tomb to hinder you from burying your dead. Now, here comes, in ancient Near East, negotiating would happen a couple ways. If you negotiated over something that was common, plain, you would do it in we talked about this, sort of a haggling manner. If you negotiate over a sensitive matter, like a tomb, you do it totally differently, and you'll hear a little bit about how this happens here. Abraham rose, bowed to the Hittites, the people of the land. He said to them, if you are willing that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me Ephron, the son of Zohar, that he may give to me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns. It is at the end of his field. For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence as property for a burying place. Now, Ephron, he happened to actually be there. He was sitting right there. He was sitting among the Hittites, and Ephron, the Hittite, answered Abraham in the hearing of Hittites, of all who went in at the city gate, no, my Lord, hear me. I give you my field, and I give you the cave that is in it. In the sight of the sons of my people, I give it to you. Bury your dead. Then Abraham bowed down before the people of the land, and he said to Ephron, in the hearing of the people of the land, but if you will hear me, I give the price of the field. Accept it from me that I may bury my dead there. Do you see in sensitive matters, what you do is someone offers you something that's like very kind, and you go, oh, I couldn't. And then he said, no, I must do this. And then the person says, no, I insist. You know what, like that. Any of you have families that you grew up in where if someone offered you something, it was expected that you say no at first, even if you know the outcome? I remember when I was 16 years old, and my great-grandmother had just moved to town, Grandma Esther Dalton, and she lived in Longmont. We lived just outside of Longmont. And I went over, she was in a retired living place, and I went over to Grandma Dalton. Grandma Dalton has a history of being very private. You don't really invite people over, because what that means is, or you don't accept invitations to other people's house, because that means then you have to invite them over later. And she's like, no, I'm not interested in that. So I went over to Grandma Dalton's apartment after, I think I just got my license, and I wanted to show her my car or whatever, something. And she made me a sandwich when I was over there, and I came home, and I said to, my parents that evening, and my grandma was also around, and I said, oh, yeah, Grandma Dalton made me a sandwich. And they went, she made you a sandwich? And it was like the scandal of the family. And my family was like, you said no, though, right? And I go, well, yeah, I said no like once, and then she insisted. And they were like, no, you have to keep saying no, or you're being rude. And I remember I was like 16. I was like, what kind of family am I growing up in? This is bizarre. But that was what was expected. If you're offered a sandwich by Grandma Dalton, you turn it down like 8 times before you find it. It's just good manners. And I'm like, man, being a Cunningham is weird. Weird. That's what's happening here. So here's, they go back from, no, I couldn't take your money. Oh, I wouldn't touch your money. I'd die before I'd touch your money. And then here's the last line. This is kind of what shores it up for you. Ephron finally answered. Now, he's still saying no, 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 but listen to how he says no. My Lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth, 400 shekels? What is that between you and me? Do you see what he just did? How much is it? It's 400. Even though he says, no, I don't want 400 from you. I want 400 from you. It's a nicety. It's a nice way of saying, we'll work it out, but this is a sensitive matter. So we'll do it by both of us resisting. And then finally, the one who does need to pay has heard what's needed, gets us 400 shekels, and pays. And the other guy's going, I'm not even going to spend this money. That sort of thing. I just think it's sort of a funny exchange. My Lord, listen to me. Bury your dead there. Abraham listened to Ephron. See, he's listening for the aha. And Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver that he had named. Of course he named it, but he just did it in a different way than it's normally done. In the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weights current among the merchants. Okay. Let's see here, verse 12 through 20. Well, let me go ahead and read this end part that I have kind of highlighted here. I'm going to read it, but I don't want to explain it, but I want you to tuck away, especially the words that are highlighted, underlined. They're important for the end, for the end of where we're going, okay? So, and it's going to feel repetitive, and it's supposed to feel. You're supposed to notice it's repetitive. You're supposed to notice the words that are used, and then it'll make sense here in a bit. So, the field of Ephron in Machpelah, which was to the east of Mamre, the field, with the cave that was in it, and all the trees that were in the field throughout its whole area, was made over to Abraham as a possession. Anything, you remember any promises about one day you'll possess the land? This is the first tiny square inch. A possession in the presence of the Hittites before all who went in at the city gate. After this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of Machpelah, east of Mamre. And then the editor says, hey, reader, that's Hebron. In the land of Canaan, verse 20, the field and the cave that is in it were made over to Abraham as property for a burying place by the Hittites. Feels repetitive, right? It's like, yeah, we know. You said that like 3 times. Why are you repeating yourself? Yeah, we know it's in the cave of the field of Mamre, east, or field of Machpelah, east of Mamre. Like, why'd you say that 3 times? Well, good. That's good you noticed. Store that away, reader. That will become important as we go here. Chapter 24. So again, we will come back to that. He buried her, buried his wife, his love. Chapter 4, Abraham is going to find a wife for Isaac. Let me jump into verse 1. I'm going to read just verses 1 through 9 here. Again, I'm not going to read all of this because it's too long. We don't have time. Chapter 24, now Abraham was old, well advanced in years. The Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. That goes back to the promise in Genesis 12, Genesis 15, I'm going to bless you. Everyone who blesses you, I will bless, that sort of thing. Verse 2, and Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household. Now, if you remember back to, I think it was chapter 12, when God showed up and said, I'm going to give you a son. And Abram said, well, I've got a servant in my house, and he's sort of like the highest up. He's probably going to get it all. He's going to inherit everything. This is Eleazar. So this is probably, the author doesn't tell us, it's probably that guy, this Eleazar, because that's, and so Eleazar, El is the name for God. Azer is helper. Remember when God makes Adam, he goes, oh, you need a helper. I'm going to give you an Azer. So El-Ezer, or Azer, is God is my help. And God is referred to that all the time throughout Scripture. So this man probably named God is my help. he took one of his oldest servants of his household that, he really trusts this guy, who had charge of all that he had. Put your hand under my thigh. Yes, I'm uncomfortable reading that. We'll talk about it in a second. That I may make you swear by Yahweh, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, because that's where they're living, right? Among whom I dwell. But will go to my country. Where did he come from? Mesopotamia, Ur of the Chaldees. He was, like from Babylon. He's like, I want you to go back and get someone there. But will go to my country, to my kindred, and take a wife for my son, Isaac. Laughter. The servant said to him, perhaps the woman may not be willing to come with me from this land. Must then I take your son back to the land from which you came? Like, if she won't come here, can I make him come there? Abraham said to him, see to it that you do not take my son back there. Why is that? Well, Yahweh, the God of the unseen realm, the heavens, who took me from my father's house. Remember chapter 12, he said, go, get going, leave. And from the land of my kindred, who spoke to me. And here's what he swore to me. He made a promise. To your offspring, well, who's that so far? Isaac, this guy, so don't take him anywhere, because to your offspring, I'm going to give this land. And Abraham's like, I've blown it a lot in life. I didn't believe it. I doubted. I went other places. He swore to me. I've come to really trust God. You know any people who have walked with God for so long that their trust is like so much more solid than it used, so much more solid than yours? They've just been around the sun more times. That's Abraham. He's like, I've been there. Trust me, it always works out, even if it doesn't look good. To your offspring, I will give this land. Now, this is interesting, okay? He will send his angel before you. This is to the servant. And you shall take a wife for my son from there. Okay, store that little piece away. He's going to send an angel before you as you go. But if the woman won't follow you, then you're free from your oath. You're fine. You can come back. Only just do not take my son there. You keep him here. So the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning this matter. Now, again, everyone's always like, I'm sorry, I didn't hear anything you said after the thigh part. That was, I know, it sounds super weird to us. He's making a promise about the continuance of his seed. So the fact that he was put his hand where he did on his body has to do with the promise of that part of your body, the seed thing, that's what I'm swearing to. I know, totally bizarre, right, to us. Ancient world, not so bizarre. He's making a promise about the continuance of Abram's seed. So that's why that's kind of there. Okay, verse 10, I think, starting in verse 10. This is an interesting passage. Then the servant, he took 10 of his master's camels and departed, taking all sorts of choice gifts from his master, and he arose. He went to Mesopotamia, where he was told to the city of Nahor. He made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at the time of evening. And he says, notice, it's the time when women go out to draw water. So he's kind of thinking through this. Where would be the best place for me to find some single women? He said, now this is interesting. He says to Yahweh, this is the servant, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today. Show steadfast love. That's that covenant love. The covenant that you made, show me that covenant love that you made with my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of men of the city, they're coming to draw water. Let the young woman to whom I shall say, please let down your jar that I may drink, and who shall say, drink, and I will water your camels. So I'm just going to ask her for a drink for me. If it's the right one, have her give me something to drink, but then may she offer to actually water my camels as well. Please let down your jar, who should drink, and I will water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this sign, I shall know that you have shown covenant love, steadfast love to my master. There's this really interesting piece, or actually, let me just finish this up because it'll be, I'll go through 21. Before he had finished speaking, that's kind of interesting. He hadn't even finished his prayer. Rebekah, who was born of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the son of Nahor, that's Abram's brother. Remember when Abram was told to leave his family? His brother stayed there. This is a descendant. Came out with a water jar on her shoulder. The young woman was very attractive in appearance, a maiden, so not married, whom no man had known. She went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, please give me a little water to drink from your jar. He's waiting for, is this the one? She said, drink, my lord. And she quickly let down her jar upon her hand and gave him a drink. When she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw water for your camels too, until they have finished drinking. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough, ran again to the well to draw water, and she drew for his camels. And I love the way this ends here. The man gazed at her in silence to learn whether Yahweh had prospered his journey or not. And I said this is the longest chapter because here's how it gets told 3 more times. This is the one that he's praying to God. Then he says to her, or then it explains it. He says, after it says like, this is what he was praying, then it tells a story that he actually did it. And then her parents or her dad and brother come out and then he retells it to them. So that's why this is such a long chapter, because he's like, you're not going to believe this. Like what just happened. Now, here's what I want us to look at. Do you remember what I said store away a minute ago? What did Abraham tell him? Who would go before him? An angel. He said, an angel. God will send an angel before you. Guess what never shows up on the pages? At least the author doesn't tell us. No angel's never mentioned. Never referred to an angel being there. Here's the point, and I think the author brilliantly but subtly speaks of the invisible hand of providence. You know what I mean by that? See, this is the way it is in my life. Most of the time, I usually don't see spectacular things that is like supernatural things. It's rare that I ever have seen anything like that. But if you ask me, how have you seen God move in your life? Oh, I could tell you stories. How have you seen God move in other people's lives? Oh, I could tell you stories. So you saw an angel? Nope. But I saw God do certain things. There's a phrase in this passage. In Hebrew, it's like there was a happening. That sounds weird to us. And in fact, he says in his prayer, he says, God, would you make a happening happen? We have words like coincidence, right? In English. That's probably the closest thing. In Hebrew, it's a happening happened. That means it just so happened that when he got there, it just so happened that what he had asked for about the camels, that she responded in some way. It's this idea of providence. Providence is something that you don't see, but it's there. It's like, you know the story of Ruth and Naomi? Ruth marries Naomi's son. He dies. They're just destitute. So they go back to their homeland in Canaan, where it's from. And Ruth says, well, I'll go to that field over there and I'll just glean what, the servants didn't pick up. Maybe we'll have enough to eat. And it says the exact same word. It says, it just so happened that was Boaz's field. Oh, and he's related to the mother-in-law. The book of Esther. Do you know this book of Esther? The young woman who ends up saving her entire nation. Do you know the one weird thing about the book of Esther that commentators are just like puzzled by and talk about? Old rabbis used to be bothered by it. Guess whose name is never mentioned in the book of Esther? God. Not even mentioned. Not once. Ever. The whole book. So much so, there were some Jewish rabbis, and we know this because there's only a couple copies of the ancient Old Testament Hebrew, only a few, where there's like in the margin, sort of like added, like, yeah, God did this. This was the Lord. Because there were not rabbis, it was before that, scribalists who were so uncomfortable that it doesn't just outright come and say, God did this, folks. And so they added in there because it's got to be obvious, it's got to be more obvious. And it's so fascinating that the original text, it's written. Now you read the story and you go, was God in charge? Oh my goodness, completely. But why is he not mentioned? Well, what does your life oftentimes feel like? Is God in charge? Of course. Is he obvious? Often not. And that's what the book of Ruth, the book of Esther, are picking up on some of these early ideas that are dropped early on. Remember we said the Abraham story is Jewish meditation literature. It's laying down breadcrumbs that you're supposed to follow and the other biblical authors are going to follow and pick up and build and go, oh, I see what's going on there. God is at work when I can't see it. I don't have to visually see things. It doesn't have to be spectacular for me to go, oh, God's at work. That's so encouraging, I think. And again, I think the author just carefully but brilliantly communicates that right here. I'll just read this other section, this last story, and then we'll get to the bit with Abraham here. There's a really interesting Genesis 24, verse 61. And you can look this up if you want to go get especially like a critical commentary. Commentators will point this out. No English Bible translates it like this. But it's in the Hebrew. Hebrew scholars who I've read have said this very thing. So there's a passage, they tell the story to the dad, the brother, and the dad and brother like, this sure seems like God. This sure seems like Yahweh. And so like, well, let us keep our daughter for a little bit longer, and then you can have her and all this stuff. And he says, please let me go back to my master. And they go, well, let's ask the girl. So Rebecca comes out and they're like, what do you want to do? Do you want to go now? And she goes, and she answers the same way that Abraham answered when he was called in Genesis 12. I'll go. So she's almost like a little Abraham. She has the faith of Abraham. She goes, yeah, I'll go. I'm good with that. So she goes back with him. She gets on her camel. She's riding back to meet this one, his master, Isaac. And this is what we read. Okay, that's the part. We're going to go down to 61. Here we go. Then Rebekah, her young woman, arose, rode the camels, followed the men. Thus the servants of Rebekah went on their way. Okay, verse 62. Now Isaac had returned from Be'er Lahai Roi. That's the, it's not important. And the dwelling of the Negev. Isaac went out to meditate. That is not what it means. This phrase, went out to, is used when King Saul's looking for David and he goes into a cave to relieve himself. And remember, David's in there. Or when it means to urinate. Okay. This is a comedy of errors in this scene right here. It's really quite funny. Isaac went out to urinate in the field toward evening, which that's what you would do. Jewish law was you had to go away from the living area. He went out to urinate in the field towards the end, and he lifted up his eyes, and behold, there were camels coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, the word is fell. She fell off her camel. That's literally what this passage says. He's out there in the field urinating. She's coming. They both see each other. She falls off the camel. He's going to the bathroom. And their eyes lock. I mean, how many people have stories of, I've heard so many stories of like, you know how we met? That's one of these. That really is what's going on in the text. It's awkward and it feels uncomfortable, but that's kind of how life is. It's awkward and uncomfortable. That's how they met. He's urinating. She's fallen off a camel. That's their story that they would have told their kids. How did you guys first see each other? Oh, boy. That's what's happening in this. Okay, I want to transition to, I'll just read the very last thing. So she falls off her camel. She asks, who's that man over there? The servant says, oh, that's my master. So she took her veil, covered herself. That means she's getting ready for marriage. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. He recounted that story a fourth time, the big long one. Then Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother, she's passed, and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. That's their meeting story. You ever ask someone their meeting? That's Isaac and Rebekah's meeting story that they would have told countless times to one another. Chapter 25, so much more we could cover here. I wish we had more time. I just want to end with this, though. These are the days. Now, hold on. Do you remember Sarah's burial? Do you remember the repetitive nature? Do you remember the words that were there? And I was like, store those away. They'll be important. Okay. They're important because the end of this is Abraham's last moments. And it's going to use language that was back in there to make you go back there and go, why is this story broken up by this story? These are the days of the years of Abraham's life, 175. Abraham breathed his last, and he died in a good old age. He was a man of, English here says full years. The Hebrew word is complete. Do you know what a homograph is? Homograph is a word that is spelled exactly the same as another word, but they mean completely different things. Like there's lead in my pencil, and I led someone to the Lord. Spelled exactly the same, mean different things, right? And the word for 7 and the word complete are homographs. That's why the number 7 gets associated with completeness, because they look exactly the same, okay? So this is the word that's used here. He died an old man, 7 complete years, and he was gathered to his people. Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him in remember this? The cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite. What direction from Mamre? East of Mamre, okay? They may be thinking, what's going on here? Well, remember that smell when you walked into the bakery and it takes you back somewhere? That's what's going on here. To an ancient reader, here's what they're thinking, especially when they read this end part that you're supposed to link back to, because you just heard these words repeated 1 billion times. So the field of Ephron in Machpelah, which was to the east of Mamre, the field with the cave, that was in it. It was a possession down to verse 19. After this, Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave of the field of Machpelah, east of Mamre. It's in Hebron, land of Canaan, in the field, in the cave. Okay, again, you're supposed to go, what's the story? Why does he keep repeating this? Well, let me just kind of both break these things down and then tie them together and see what the ancient person, what smell from the bakery they're getting when they hear this. Mamre, do you remember the oaks of Mamre? God would oftentimes appear at the beginning of 22 or what. God appears at the oaks of Mamre. And Mamre becomes that odor in the air of, oh, that's like Eden. It's a little oasis, right? So Mamre is, to the ancient person, that's like talking about Eden. It's an echo of Eden in that sense. East of Eden, what was east of Eden? You remember that language from the first story? Humanity gets kicked out. Which direction? East of Eden. There are cherubim set up guarding the east side. Why is that? Because that's where the humans are. They're on the east side. They can't enter back in. So it's this burial, this tomb, it's on the east of Eden. It's a cave. The word cave in Hebrew is a noun form of the word naked. Now you might go, what is that about? Well, we speak of an exposure in a rock, don't we? You know what I mean by that? An exposure in a rock is maybe a flat part. It's a part you can stand on, something along. This is the closest equivalent. It's a little different, but think about it this way. The earth, if the earth has a hole in it, that's a cave, right? That part of the earth, it's without. You kind of get that? It's missing that part. If you dig a hole, that's like a cave. It's now missing. It's exposed. It doesn't have it. It's naked. Again, seems weird for us, but you can kind of make the mental connection there, okay? The word cave is a noun form of the word naked. Machpelah means pair. The cave of Machpelah, the naked pair. The naked pair. Who does that sound like? The naked pair. Yeah, who were our first parents? The first pair, they were naked and unashamed. The naked pair is east of Mamre. I mean, do you smell that in the bakery? The ancient person does. They smell it and they're like, man, you're laying down all. I can't help but think of that. Abraham and Sarah end, and we're told in 25, did we read that part there? Chapter 25. These are the days of Abraham's life, 175, and breathed his last, good old age, full of years, gathered to his people. And then it says, Isaac and Ishmael, his two boys, he's got a number of, but these two anyway, his sons buried him in the naked pair in the field of Ephron, east of that place that's like Eden, the field that Abraham had purchased. Do you see how the author is tying the end of Abraham's life together? He's saying they're like our first parents, but they're still what? East of Eden. What do they have the hope of? It's letting you know the story's not done. As we said at the beginning, it's not going to die in a heat loss. This world has a fulfillment. It has a conclusion. It has a telos. It has an end to it. It's getting somewhere. It's not scrapping the original plan. No plan B. So even though there's death and there's sting to it and there's mourning to it, there's still that scent from the bakery of the original garden. And the hope is, will we get back there? We must get back. God doesn't seem to be letting go of the original plan, to the original story. And this is exactly what then biblical authors carry on and on in their writings. And again, if we had time, I would love to take you to so many of these passages, especially in the Psalms, where the psalmist says, maybe I'll just read one to you because I can't not. Here's the hope. Hosea, this isn't Psalm, this is Hosea chapter 13, verse 14. I don't have it up on the screens, I apologize. Hosea 13, 14. God writes, I shall ransom them from the power of Sheol. That's the underworld. That's oftentimes people thought of as you get there by going into like a cave. You get there by going down. I shall redeem them from death. O death, where are your plagues? O Sheol, where is your sting? Does that sound like anything in the New Testament? Yeah, because Paul's meditating on these scriptures. That's why he says, yeah, we're going to die, but death, you've lost your sting. Why is that? Because I know my Redeemer lives. I know he will ransom me from the grave. I'll just read this last one. Here's one of my favorite passages, the book of Job. Job chapter 19. Let me actually put up, it's so good. Job 19, verse 25. Okay, listen to these words. This will be up on the screen. He writes, for I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last, that is at the end, I will stand, he will stand upon the heavens, clouds. He will stand upon here. He's coming here. We're not just going, he's coming here. He will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, what's that referring to? Your physical death. After death, okay? After my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. That doesn't mean after you've died. That means after you've died. You're going to die, and then one day you're going to be back in your flesh. Resurrection is what he's getting to. Yet in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. My heart faints within me. This is so good. We could just go on and on. Scripture builds this hope. And the Apostle Paul and all the other New Testament others, they keep building that hope. And ultimately what they argue is that when Jesus came, his coming wasn't just to give hope, it was to defeat death. And at his ascension, according to Ephesians chapter 4, this week, read Ephesians chapter 4, verse 8. Ephesians 4:8 is where the Apostle Paul says, do you know what Jesus accomplished when he ascended to the Father? Because if you think about it, we kind of don't have much of a theology of the ascension, do we? I have a theology of the death. I have a theology of the resurrection. I don't have much of a theology of the ascension. What's that about? Well, Paul says in Ephesians, it says when he ascended, here's what he did. He ascended on high and he led a host of captives free. Who are those? That's Abraham. That's all of the human righteous dead. That's our theology of the resurrection, is that every righteous person who dies now, you're immediately with the Lord. You're at his right side. You're not in Sheol. You're with the Lord. That's our hope. That's why we can face death. That's why Jesus could face his death, because he knew what he was accomplishing. He was accomplishing the death of death, is the way the author of Revelation puts it. The death of death. That's what I long for. I don't know about you. I long for the death of death. When that smell of the bakery that I just can't quite make out, I actually find myself in the bakery holding a piece of bread. And this is our reminder. The great baker has allowed his own body to be broken for us. So here's what I want us to do. Would you please stand with me? And I want to lead us through a time of communion. As Tyler and Kayla just play softly behind us. And I want us to think about this reality of a God who would be so committed to the death of death, so committed to new creation, to you standing in your flesh one day, but your perfected flesh, not this flesh, it'll be perfected. And you'll see face to face your God. Whew. And he said, here's my guarantee. I stepped into your world broken and sinful, died for you. My body broken. Let's take the bread, remembering his death. And because no covenant can be made without the shedding of blood, Scripture tells us, for him to make a new covenant between us and the Most High God, his blood is shed, spilled for us for the remission of sins. Let's take the cup. Heavenly Father, I pray with my brothers and sisters here this evening that you would both encourage us now in the moments, the seasons that we're in, and would you spur us on as we take steps into a future that is maybe unknown to us. God, would you send your angel before us as we go? And even though we do not see, we know, God, that you are not inactive, but you are busy at work in our lives and in every one of your human families' lives. God, help us to be fruitful for that service. Help us to keep that our focus and our attention, and help us to see all woes and wounds and weaknesses now in light of that ultimate purpose. Father, it's in Jesus' matchless name, our Lord, our King, that we ask all of these things, knowing you hear us. Amen and amen. You guys, thanks so much for just hanging along in this study through the book of Genesis. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed doing it with you guys. So love you. Hope you have a great week. I hope you'll be back next week for some Foth stories. Have a great rest of your evening.